Welcome to the Battle Plan, and today we have Scott Maxwell, who's the CEO of Wounded Warrior Canada. Prior to joining Wounded Warrior Canada, Scott successfully transitioned his experience in the federal government to the Ontario provincial legislature. While working within the provincial government, he was able to advance a number of important social policies improvements, focusing particularly on mental health and social services available to children and youth. On June 11, 2007, Trooper Darryl Caswell, a high school friend of Scott's, was killed by a roadside bomb in Afghanistan. From that day forward, Scott made a promise to himself that he would find a way to give back to those who so bravely served Canada. In 2013, Scott accepted the position of Executive Director of Wounded Warrior Canada. He embarked on a journey in nonprofit sector that has seen him successfully transform what was a volunteer-based local charitable fund into a national mental health service provider that support over 2,000 veterans, first responders, and their family each year. And I'm so pleased to have Scott today because not only that, he is a very good friend. We're constantly seeing each other everywhere. Scott, thank you for answering the call and being on the Battle Plan.
My pleasure, Bruno. Thanks for all you're doing and continue to do to make a difference.
Thank you, Scott. And then, so just tell us about you. How do you become the CEO of Wounded Warrior Canada? Because Wounded Warrior is a very known brand around the world.
Yeah, I was working for a former federal minister of consular affairs. I went to the University of Toronto. I wanted to become a foreign service officer for the country. That was kind of my goal, or work in consular affairs or foreign affairs here at home. And the minister I was working for, his nephew was Sapper Mike McTagg, and the gentleman's name that I was working for was Dan McTagg. And when Mike was injured and that we lost a number of Canadians that day, I got word of it that this had happened to Mike, and we were in Ottawa, kind of sitting in his office, and the family gets notified. And, I don't need to tell you or your listeners about what happens that time, but got to know some of the members that went overseas. Our director of health services here, Phil Ralph, who was a Padre for 25 years with the engineers in Toronto. I got to know Phil and other members of the organization. Certainly Mike was a member of Phil's regiment. Phil went over there to see kind of Mike off at Langstool, and Mike survived. And from that experience in Langstool, a group of a team here in Whitby, Ontario, got together to create the Sapper Mike McTagg Wounded Warrior Fund, which has grown into become Wounded Warriors Canada. But I got to know a bunch of these guys through my relationship with Dan. As my bio read there, I carried on my career, but before getting to the provincial legislature in Ontario, Darryl Caswell was killed, and for me that was a life-altering moment, seeing that photo on the screen while I was eating breakfast one morning, that he had been killed the night before in Afghanistan. And I don't know, I just had a bunch of flashbacks to we were sitting in the auditorium in Bowmanville High School when watching the second plane hit the tower on 9/11, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm going to go over there and do what I can to right this wrong. I'm going to join the Canadian Forces." So, 6 years from that day, on September 11th, he was killed. So, or 6 years and around that day, he was killed. So, it was just a really galvanizing thing. I remember when he was talking about joining the military back then. I think they're in that era. I hear reservists tell me they would not even wear their uniforms to the unit. They would just bring a change of, dress in civvies and then change when they got there. We kind of said, you're going into for the free education. Like, we just weren't cognizant enough of what would entail and had entailed for those that wear a uniform. And I started to get a lot of wind on what that meant very quickly when he became a dragoon, pre-deployment training. He's in Afghanistan, boom, boom, boom. There's a lot going on. I'm reading the headlines, and not too long after that, he was killed. So for me, that period of my life was a galvanizing point of time, and that really propelled me onto this. I went to the provincial legislature, as I said, to continue my public service career in adolescent and youth mental health, and then in the Ministry of the Children and Youth Services. And then the Sapper Mike McTagg Wounded Warrior Fund wound down as our time in Afghanistan wound down in 2012-13. Then the organization, which was just a board of directors, volunteer kind of guys in Whitby, Ontario here, were inundated with this plea for support for mental health from particularly Afghan veterans who had made it home, but as we know, hadn't made it all the way home in many respects. And so they're going, wow, we're not equipped to do this. Mental health. I mean, we were sending comfort items to the troops in Langstuhl. That was the whole mission of this thing, to make them feel a bit of home in an American military hospital. Mm-hmm. So they were looking for an executive director. They decided to kind of wrap that up and build something for mental health. I was done with my years in government at that point. I had enough, as we always talk about, with respect to the government and all those wonderful people that work in it. But things don't happen that quickly, and I was getting frustrated with that a bit. And I was like, and then I had this personal attachment to particularly my friend Darryl's life. That was a calling for me. I always thought if there was an opportunity to give back in some way, I should give it a try. And in 2013, I joined in and jumped into the not-for-profit fray and trying to build a national mental health service providing organization.
Which you did. Which you did. The one thing I would like to touch on is actually something that a lot of vets don't think about and a lot of people aren't aware, is how the work that we do, especially, it's a little bit different in other countries, but in Canada, the military is not something that's being like advertised everywhere. It's something that we really, throughout history, actually, I've read a lot of those books from Pierre Burton, that Canada has actually, throughout 150 years, we're not a pro-military country. Right. It's always been, our military has done great work throughout the world and everything. But one of the things that people forget along is how what we do does impact the civilian world, right? And look at you, it impacted you directly, which pushed you into doing something better, something bigger, and go and created Wounded Warriors Canada. Yeah. Now, a lot of veterans don't know that. We don't think about that because we're told to, to keep that for ourselves and, just keep your mouth shut and keep on doing and do your day and all these things. But there are people like yourself that really do care and want to make a difference. And I think that what comes together is that symbiosis of the veterans world and the civilian world to make a better community, to do all these things.
Totally. I mean, it was one of the things, because we don't kind of foist the military on Canadians, and of course the majority of which are civilian Canadians. My only hesitancy to do this was, would I be I haven't worn a uniform. What are these guys and gals going to think of me? Will I be accepted by them? I mean, I'll only ever feel so comfortable, even after all this time doing this work. Thankfully I haven't had a bad day though with it. I mean, I've tried to just make my intentions clear and make the organization intentions crystal clear with what it is we're here to do, for all that you all have done for us, period. So thankfully it's gone really well. And look at the relationships I have with you at the top of the list. But, it's one of those hesitancies that I had because I wasn't sure, because the civilians aren't, kind of force-fed military, forces, history, even in school. Like it was, hence my conversations my friends and I were having with Darryl when he wanted to join was kind of like, what does it even mean to join? I mean, is it free education? Is it all these things that we just assume? Well, obviously not. And so no matter what, no matter the fears I had or the anxiety I had about doing this and taking a leap of faith into a completely unknown world, I just felt that I just trusted my instincts, and that is, if you do it the right way and you do it for the right reasons, then I thought there's probably no better people that would support this effort than veterans and serving members of the Canadian Forces. And it really has gone that way. The other thing I'll say is I remember people looking at me saying, you got to be crazy. To do this, you've got a great job. You're in the public service of Ontario. You've had a great run in the federal government sector. And now you're going, from downtown Toronto to this little office in the back of an orthodontist office in Whitby, Ontario, with dead hornets in the ceiling and all these board members dropping all their furniture off because we didn't have an office. It was myself, a laptop, and a phone. And they're like, what do you, and we're out of Afghanistan now, donations are going to dry up. Like this is, whoa, you are really putting yourself out there. And I thought, okay, well, I remember looking at the minister I was working with at the province, and she's kind of asking me these questions, like, you thought this through? I think it's very, honorable, but if you thought this through. And anyway, I never had doubt. I trusted the process. I trusted my instinct. I trusted Canada. And there hasn't been a year that we have not raised as much money as we did the previous year in 7 years leading into COVID-19. Mm-hmm. And that is a testament to the fact that while we don't pound our chests as a nation in terms of our support for those who serve our country at home and abroad. Canadians profoundly care about the health and wellness of those who serve our country at home and abroad. And if it wasn't, I can say that honestly, because if it wasn't that way, then Wounded Warriors Canada sure as hell would not exist and be able to do the work that we're doing today, because it's on the backs of the care, compassion, and generosity, primarily just because of the disproportionate ratio of civilians to the military population, even the first responder population. They're funding all this. They're making it all happen. And they do it in such a silent, typical, quiet Canadian fashion. But boy, do we punch above our weight, as is the history of the country.
I know, and that's just it. I think that what you mentioned then is that they do care. It's just I think it's the military and the government's way of not educating what it is that we do. Because a lot of people, when they hear what we do, they're like amazed. They're like, what? You guys went and did all of these things. And then they just jump in. They want to support. They want to do these things. They just don't know where. And it's the same thing for veterans when they're injured or they're transitioning out. They don't know where to go, right? Even though we hear all the time Wounded Warriors and all these things, but you've definitely transformed Wounded Warrior to what it is. My next question was to you: what was the hardest transitional part for you to go from? But I think you went in there. You exactly said that. You said the image that you would face. You were worried about that.
Yep.
But you were never in doubt about the mission success.
No.
Which is something that I can correlate to the veterans that you're serving. So they recognize that in you and your willingness to serve. So I like to tell the people like yourself that do the work that you do, that you don't need to go to war to save someone's life.
Exactly.
Right? Serving your community, serving, being there for someone is how you do it. And obviously you've done it over 2,000 times, Scott, right? And you've helped families and you help these things.
Yeah.
So for you, when you did transition over to Wounded Warrior Canada, because once again, I'm going to mention it, and I'd like for us to talk about the difference between the one in the States and the ones all across the world and all these things. But what was, when you did take the position, you did come in and you set yourself up like in that little office.
Yeah.
What was your aha moment? What was the saying, you know what, I got this. This is the way we're going to go.
Yeah. Well, I'd say there's two things. The most challenging part of if I could start with probably what was more challenging, which then led to the aha moment, if you wouldn't mind if I could do that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is your show, Scott.
Okay, great. The most challenging part was landing in this unknown territory for me as never being involved in the business or nonprofit sector at all. Trying to but with so little kind of in front of me on the plate for what the organization had in front of me, that I felt like I could only go up. If I just charted the course right, slowly built a team, we could only go up. And I'd say that one of the most challenging thing was, because we were set up as a foundation, we've grown into a mental health service provider directly. But we started out, like a lot of these organizations are, as foundations. They try to raise awareness, education about the need, raise funds, and then disperse funds to third-party, programs out there that are trying to make a difference, but work outside of the government, and subsequently don't have a lot of money to do what they want to do. So we were funding from 2013 to 2015. We were funding an array of different things, everything from homeless veteran support through the likes of Vets Canada, through the Veterans Transition Program, we were funding all sorts of things to try to identify the need that existed in the NGO space and existed outside of what VAC and D&D are providing from a health services perspective. And so we did that, and we formed great relationships. We're making, I would say, a decent impact. But at the time, around 2015, we met people well, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Linford, and his wife Catherine. They joined us as ambassadors for the organization. Started to bring to us this family-based lens of the fact that PTS is not just an individual injury like it had been treated historically, like it has been represented. They really talked about it as a family-based injury. So with COPE, Couples Overcoming Post-Traumatic Stress Every Day, coming to us as a concept and adding Dr. Tim Black from the UVic as our national clinical advisor and building this team, we started to think of ourselves maybe that we could, having so much experience in funding things and identifying gaps and realizing that there's more gaps to fill, and maybe we could fill them ourselves. Why don't we try it? With COPE, that eventually in a year of funding COPE and looking at the operational model of funding, of having 100% positive control over everything you do, every dollar you're spending, how it's allocated, who your clients are, research and data, versus raising funds and kind of just giving the money away out to third-party providers and not really 100% clear on the impact.
Because isn't that what you started at the beginning?
That's right. Right till COPE came, we were like the others. We raise funds and we give grants, effectively. And when you're just raising money and giving grants, well, a couple things were hard. Adjudicating who gets what and who doesn't get money. And I finally, after about 2 or 3 years, I said to myself, I'm not here to be an adjudicator on who's going to get how much money to do what. To me, I'm here to be way more hands-on and make a much bigger difference for me to stay here long in this space.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in that position to decide which organization gets what and whose injury is more important, because we find that all the time, right?
Yeah, and then you've got people that you had relationships with. And so the most challenging thing for us was to get to a point where, we could actually grow and have capacity and scalability to become a mental health service provider. And COPE was the program that we launched onto the scene in Canada that showed us that this is the way we need to go. We need to have everything in-house. We need to have our own clinical team. We need to invest in research that supports our own program delivery. And we just need to have positive control through and through. So that's what we did beginning in 2016 with COPE success, moving into the trauma resiliency program residentially for individuals. We transformed our couples-based equine therapy program. In the absence of a national psychiatric service dog standard and the Canadian General Standards Board process falling apart under back funding, we decided we would just come up with our own certification and standards for schools that are going to train dogs to pair with veterans and first responders with our money. And by the end of that 17, we had everything in-house. But we had to have hard conversations with people that we knew relied on our funding, that we were no longer going to continue to do things that way. And that was a really challenging time, because you build friendships and relationships and you know that good work is happening through what they do. But at the end of the day, when it's not your own and that's not your team and so on, the best way forward for us was to take that next step. But it was a very challenging process to get to build up to in-house, but B, and probably more importantly, to have those tough conversations with friends and colleagues that do good work and did rely on our funding. The aha moment, which is the uplifting part of this conversation, is when we made that transition and had kind of our 4 core programs, our animal-assisted therapy programs, and our group-based residential trauma programs, COPE and the trauma resiliency program. And we started to have national footprint, and really good news was traveling fast amongst the veteran community about the work of Wounded Warriors Canada. Yeah. Presumptive legislation came in province by province for first responders. And up until 2017, I really can honestly say I had not heard from first responders nearly at all talking about operational stress injuries or occupational stress injuries, talking about the similarity downstream of the manifestation of post-traumatic stress, these kinds of OSIs. And with presumptive legislation now taking the burden off first responders to not have to prove to their insurance company that the injury is actually a result of their service, the floodgates had opened up.
And that's when you guys did the transition over to accept first responders now, which is
and now we have
amazing.
Wounded Warriors Canada umbrella is uniform service.
Yeah.
So serving members of the Canadian Forces, veterans, police, fire, paramedics.
Because it's just one big family. A lot of people, might not see that, but we do. It's parallel. Usually most people that serve in the military will end up serving as first responders because it's the same kind of direction, the same type of service.
Right. And so now we had the clinical capacity and the scalability to start to bring first responders into our deliveries, which we did, pilot those deliveries in 2017. And I wasn't sure, to be honest, how would our donor base respond? How would the country respond to us including these people? This was not yet kind of top of mind or as understood, maybe as it is certainly in 2020. With the likes of what's happened with the shootings in Atlantic Canada, just as far as April, these kinds of things. But so we started to run the pilot deliveries, and we were started by running defined serials. So we'd have veteran serials and we'd have first responder serials. And in those, I remember walking through, it was a couples-based equine program. We ran the first one for first responders, and it was Thanksgiving 2017. We had run the last veteran group. And then 10 days later, we ran the next first responder group, the first responder group.
Mhm.
And I remember walking with a psychologist around the barn after, and all the full staff papers on the wall that, outline, how do you rate the impact of this is the couples based therapy to the spouse. How do you rate the impact of your spouse's injury on your life? And it'd be like 15 on a scale of 10. And then you'd ask the injured member, how do you rate the impact of your injury on your spouse partner? And they'd be like 5. Anyway, like all these kinds of things. And I said to Jim, who's the psychologist, said, Jim, I mean, if you closed your eyes and you didn't know, or plugged your ears, closed your eyes, and you just walked into that, the evaluation side and all the feedback we received 10 days ago for our veteran delivery, and you come in here and you look at the same responses being generated from our first ever first responder delivery, you would not be able to tell who was who in the two groups.
Because it's the same, right?
The downstream effects of trauma, prolonged exposure, the injuries that form.
You know what? I face this all the time because I work with first responders as well, Scott. And this is one thing that I want to bring up to the audience, to people to listen, because if you are a first responders, this is many, many times, I'm talking over 50 times I've been told this story, is that they come to see me and they say, Bruno, I would like to talk to you because I know that you're a mental health advocate. You help veterans, you help these things. Listen, I don't have as bad as PTSD as you because I didn't go to war and everything, and I stopped them right there. Perfect. And I go, listen to me. PTSD doesn't discriminate. It doesn't give you less or more because you've seen something traumatic. And I want you to think about it. We trained, we did our thing, and we go away for 6, 7, 9 months, and we go through these traumatic things. And then you're absolutely right. It's so intense. It's a short duration, but it's intense. You've been doing your work for the past 12, 15, 20 years, going on doors. And I'm going to tell you that everyday doors you go on to, you're not knocking on them to say, hey, you're an exemplary citizen. You're actually dealing with the worst of society on a daily basis. So where I got PTSD in about 7 months, let's just say, we'll take that example. You've got PTSD over a long period of time of dealing with trauma. So just so you know, your PTSD is the same as mine. We can get together. And at that point in time, I can see their shoulders just dropping and leaving the weight.
100%. And do you want to talk about an aha moment? It was profound. It was a profound aha moment. Not just like, oh, that's cool. It was, oh my goodness. This, like, wow, the downstream effects of how I kind of look at it 2 ways, and you just outlined it perfectly. From the veterans we know and support, they get injured in those short bursts of, the deployment side of things, and you're back, and then you're trying to cope with, being dropped off and someone complained about the ringtone of Tim Hortons. Exactly. And it's like, no, I can't, this is not good. And then, so the rapidity of that, then you've got the first responder side, that it's just the prolonged exposure, day by day, month by month, the glass filling up, everyone's glass sizes are a bit different until something, it might be that last scenario, or similarly, incidents involving children, whether you're a veteran, you're serving overseas, or you're here dealing with it every day on the roadside, or in domestic abuse situations, or anything.
When I heard the stories from some of my friend cops that I actually were affected to either sex trafficking or kids or abusive kids and everything, and they kind of tell me what they went through, I'm going to tell you, we've done some crazy stuff in the forces. I've done some pretty hairy stuff, but I would never do that job. Because you can't unsee the things you've seen, and they tell me we have to watch it because we're looking for evidence, we're looking for these things. I don't think any human that's worth his salt can look at that stuff and not be affected by it.
And then the other thing too that's happening in this modern era, this contemporary period with first responders, notwithstanding what they're dealing with every day now with COVID, but what was their interaction with the high propensity of mental health cases. So the Ontario Provincial Police, they're saying for a massive service representing, the province of Ontario, they're dealing with about 44% of the call volume involves a mental health scenario. Yeah. That is staggering, and it's not how it's been historically.
And I bet you it's going up since COVID.
Right. And what happens is, because they're interacting with people that are in distress and having a really, really hard time, then you have to get them to say, well, I might have a mental health injury or illness too. They don't want to see themselves ever in terms of the way they're seeing mental health on the daily. They just can't put themselves, like, how could you? Like, that's not me. Mm-hmm. But, obviously there's various forms of mental illness and mental injury, but that's not me, that's not me, that's me. It cannot be me. And
well, I think that's the big river in Egypt kind of part of things, denial, right? Which is, it was the same thing when I got, it took me 3 times to accept a diagnosis. The doctor was telling me, Bruno, you're exhibiting signs of post-traumatic stress. And I literally told her, it was the unit doc. I told her, I don't know where you went to school, but this guy doesn't get PTSD, right? Because, I've seen people around me get it. And I'm like, not me.
Not me. And, we see that. So the first responder side, specific, like right now, kind of with all that's going on and the volume of mental health cases they're interacting with and all these kinds of extra stressors, it's really come to light that now more than ever, the downstream effects are crystal clear. That to your point, you could serve, 4 years in the military, 1 tour, whatever, or 30 years as a police officer, firefighter, paramedic. And what doesn't matter, once that injury manifests itself, the downstreams, the symptoms, the changes are eerily similar. And my goodness, are we seeing that right across the country?
Yeah, you guys are doing some amazing work, which is something I want to talk to you about. The experiences that the first responders and veterans, what it would look like for somebody to reach out to Wounded Warrior Canada, and hear about that. But the thing is, before we go into that part of the questioning, I would like to know if you can explain to our U.S. Listeners or Australia or all these things. There are different Wounded Warriors around the world. That is it a brand? Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe just the term being such a fitting term, like especially when it comes to the military, the warrior kind of understanding. Wounded Warriors, it was just something that came to mind for the team here in Canada during Afghanistan, and the fireman's carry and the logo for us. It was just a kind of a fitting encapsulation of what certainly how I think civilians and Canadians look at all of our men and women who serve. In the United States, Wounded Warrior Project, which started around the same time as, well, not as Wounded Warriors Canada, but as the Sapper Mike McTagg Wounded Warrior Fund back in 2006. Obviously, they were right into it in Afghanistan, and they recognized that they were going to have an astonishing need on the mental health side, and that's kind of, they do a lot of physical rehabilitation work, but mental health certainly leads the way. No relation to each other in any country in any way.
So they're not connected in any way. Everybody runs their own ship.
No, everyone runs their own ship. Other than the first 2 words of our names, there's no relationship. We're at a level now where we'd like to begin to form some collaborative best practice sharing and that kind of thing. Now that we're a service provider, we made not a ton of sense just if in the foundation world, because we were just raising money and dispersing funds. But now when we're directly engaged in the service provision side, the time is now perfect for us to begin to have these conversations with the American-based organizations, with Wounded Warrior Project. In the United Kingdom, we work with Help for Heroes quite a bit. In Soldier On Australia, down in Australia, we work with members and vets from there. That's pretty much it. I'd say part of the problem in the mental health space is certainly the siloed nature. Everyone kind of gets into their own little silo, and then they just kind of go at it. I kind of understand it. Life gets busy, but one of the things I'm working very aggressively on is breaking down these siloed relationships, which can also be a navigational barrier for members trying to find out where they and what they can access.
Do you believe that silo way of operating, which is I've been finding, and some vets are coming to that, is that there's so many organizations kind of doing the same thing, instead of realizing, hey, if we get together, what are you really good at? Can we kind of support each other in a strategic partnership? Because everybody's going out there for the funds. I get it. And, everybody's talking about that. But veterans have been noticing that, they get confused. Well, what are you offering? Where we offer mental health service? What are you offering, right? And it's kind of like this stuff. Would you say that would be it?
Absolutely. Now, like, to me, there's a couple significant barriers to accessing care in Canada. One is that simply the first one is navigational barriers. Where do you go to find out what for this kind of treatment you go here, for that kind of treatment you go here. Here's who does it. I can't believe in 2020 that there's really not a simplistic, straightforward virtual directory where you can just you think it's like we have
it's the government. Scott, it's the government. They still have websites from the 1990s.
Well, exactly. Like I think there's an app for everything except like how to access services based on what you might be looking for. So it's a foremost issue. And then you've got the siloed nature of the service providers themselves that don't communicate. And that's, you talk about the international landscape. I mean, it's bad enough, but it kind of makes sense. They're in their country doing their thing. We're in ours. You're not going to, correspond all the time. But here in Canada, it's a big issue. I've got tons of examples to cite on that. I won't go through them all, but I was talking to this group, Greenstone, they're an addiction treatment facility out in just northern Ontario, like in Muskoka area of Ontario. And I had a lady reach out because she was referred to us from case managers at VAC and the Toronto Police Association. And I mean, they had never heard of what we were doing. We had never heard of what they were doing. And they're about an hour and a half away from our office.
Right.
That's just but one short, quick example. Where I'm making it part of my effort here going forward to bring a lot of this in and remove these barriers to navigating care. And then hopefully by leveraging what they do that is different from us and vice versa, we can begin a much stronger referral-based network. So the veteran or the first responder doesn't have to do all the navigating on their own.
Right.
The service providers that they're interacting with, that should be our job to help. If I don't do this, I know who does. That kind of relationship, which is not happening sufficiently in Canada.
Because one of the things that some veterans are also having an issue with is, having to tell their stories constantly over and over and over at a time. Well, let's say we go through the COPE program and we're ready to leave that baggage behind. But now the next program we go to or the next thing we go to, we have to tell that story over again. Man, I just want to access to these things to kind of do that stretch. Because the thing is that a lot of people think that it's a blanket covering of how to treat veterans and first responders. And here's what I'm going to tell you. And I learned that from some psychologists down in the state. And she said, you've met one veteran, you've met one veteran. That person will deal differently with their traumas, with their things than the other person. Now, of course, we go out, like you said, you created the COPE program and these things, this works for the majority of them. Right?
Absolutely. And now your point, like what I was saying with this addictions treatment facility, she said because they must be accredited with Manitoba Blue Cross. So vets that go there don't have, it's fully covered as it should be. But she was saying where we're finding a gap is the vast majority of our veterans that are in our program had issues related to substance abuse and so on because of their traumatic experiences.
They were self-medicating. Yeah, they were self-medicating.
So I was saying, well, where do you send them as after action with their plan? Well, again, there wasn't much there. So I said, well, this is exactly where Wounded Warriors should come in next. You've helped them manage their substance abuse problems. Now let's work on the trauma side. Let's work on the OSI side. Like there's got to be a couple of 3-part plan here, because if you don't, what's the next 60 days going to look like?
Or maybe he'll show up to you first, Scott. Right? And say, I want to do all this work with my wife and everything. And then through the program, the wife or somebody comes out, or maybe he does as well. Yep. He or she comes and says, I actually have a substance abuse. And you go, here we go.
And now, actually, matter of fact, to your point about spouses, the lady, the coordinator was actually saying that what they're finding is that when the ill and injured member gets home from the program, 30, 60, 90 days, they're now realizing that they didn't realize before that their spouse or partner has also been self-medicating, has all untreated. And now the person that comes home is like, oh my goodness, like you've fallen all onto this on your own. There is no help in the community for you. You don't have full coverage through VAC. So talking about PTSD being a family-based injury, back to what I was saying, it's like this is just but one example of if we're not kind of treating it, looking at it, scoping it this way, well, this is the kind of interaction.
We're missing things. People are falling through the cracks. And it's something that I mentioned a long, long time ago that I coined from my personal experience with my family of secondhand PTSD is what I called it. It's like now everybody's walking on eggshells. My kid, my wife, all these things going like, who's walking through the door today? And that was the impact that when you're stuck in your own pain and your darkness that you're not seeing, you're hurting people. but you're not seeing what the impact is at. And I think that's where Wounded Warrior Canada made the difference for me when you started with COPE and all these things. And I was like, man, this is so amazing.
We just recently finished development of a spousal resiliency program, residential program just for spouses, because we realized in treating couples through COPE and couples-based equine that they were saying, this is amazing. We're understanding the impacts of the injury and how to process and regulate it together. But because many of these spouses have been living this way for so long before they get to care, they've become so used to overcompensating emotionally for their injured husband or wife or partner. So that they're only kind of getting so much out of it. And then there's, even in group therapy, there's still, it's okay. Like they're still over emotionally compensating because that's just what their rhythm is now. And they kind of were saying to the clinicians, would it be nice, my goodness, if we just had our own independent environment to heal and be treated. So second pilot of our spousal resiliency program finished 3 days before the COVID cliff.
How did it go?
Simply unbelievable, transformational kind of work. And so we are now in our COVID group therapy restart plan now, and we'll have deliveries scheduled for the fall for both COPE, the trauma resiliency program, and the spousal resiliency program as well. So we're back at it again. But just to the point of the family-based thing, the other thing I'll just add to your listeners that we also realized, and I know a lot of people listening to this probably saying, what about the kids?
Right.
What about the kids?
It's actually a research that's going to go on with Veterans Affairs.
Right. So one of our doctoral scholars, we made a 10-year, $400,000 commitment to SINVAR back in 2013 when we first got started in this. And our third, which funds 2 doctoral scholarship students every year. Our third doctoral scholar, Helena is her name, she finished at University of Calgary, went on to build an ISTEP program for kids out of the Edmonton MFRC. Kind of had scaled up what she could do at that one particular MFRC and brought the concept to us last spring, saying, hey, you're not doing anything for kids. We've been longing to do stuff for kids who are living in a home with a parent affected by an OSI. And so we built the Wounded Warriors Canada Warrior Kids program. It's both a camp-based program, up to 25 kids per camp, and now we pivoted to employ a virtual Warriors Kids program. We put 100 kids through it this summer who lost the opportunity to go to camp due to COVID. So anyway, I think our spectrum of care now has rounded out the concept and the truism that OSIs, PTSD are family-based injuries that need attention.
That's amazing. And which brings us into the question that I said I was going to ask you. So if there are first responders out there, spouses, veterans that are listening to this, what would be a typical way to either reach out, and where does it go from there? And what would be the kind of like the journey?
Yeah. So the vast majority of people they apply directly off our website.
Okay.
And every program page has a very straightforward and simple apply here application button. There are auto-generated forms that go into our health services coordinators, and then they're in touch with the applicant to let them know their application has been received. Clinical intake screening session is booked for the clinical intake. One of the things that we're big on is that our team members here aren't deciding who goes on what program. This is not I know you, you know me, someone knows somebody. This is about making sure that for each program, the applicants are in the right place to get the most out of the various programs that we offer. Because they're all group based. So if someone's not there and is not really right or at the time to be there, it can impact the entire program and the group as a whole. It's really important.
I would like for you to extend on that, because I've been part of programs where people weren't ready, and I've also seen on the other side of things. Sorry to interrupt there, Scott, but to the other side is that of not being picked. Right, I've counseled people who weren't picked for either the Invictus Games, Wounded Warrior, Soldier on, all that. So what does that mean?
Yeah, it just means like it means sometimes maybe they haven't got the clinicians will do go through the screening criteria of where you're at in your life. Are you using these substances? Are you here? Anger, emotion, these kinds of things. And sometimes they're very honest with their answers, thankfully, because one of the things that we haven't had happen too often, but we know that some of the answers to the questions in the clinical intake were different than the reality of their situation. So when they come to a group program, or maybe their situation's deteriorated from the clinical intake time frame and maybe the 60 days that's gone by since they actually get into the group program, or the 30 days, or whatever the case may be. So it's not a perfect process, But ideally, we're just being, it's not so much either what they need to tell us about themselves. That's about, a good 50% of it. But we need to be, we want to be very honest with them in terms of, this isn't easy work. You're in this residential setting for up to a week at a time with 6-month follow-up, life coaching. I mean, this is intense stuff. So if you're not yet ready, we don't want them to get there and be overwhelmed either, and to set them back or make them, do any sort of damage to anything that they're going through in their life, or set them back even a moment in time. Mm-hmm. So I'd say it's a two-part approach. And then we have lots of people. The good news is very rarely do are we screening in people that really shouldn't be there. I'd say it's the other way around, where when we're honest with them about what they're going to have to do and what they're going to have to go through to get the most out of the program, it's the veteran or the first responder that says, I'm just not there yet in my journey. And we say that's perfectly fine.
Yeah. And I had to realize that, and I realized it a little bit hard. Actually, it was one of the first programs to go on was with Soldier On, was supposed to go to 9 Megan.
Okay.
And being a soldier, I was pushing through it.
Well,
to the march. Yeah. We were going to do the march and all these things. And I wasn't ready.
Okay.
Right. At the time, I was drinking a lot. I was, not ready to be in crowds. I was not ready to be mixed in, because Soldier On's a little bit more militaristic.
Yes, sure.
They still have the officers that came in, and it was kind of like a little bit of dog and pony. And I was like, I had my feelings, and my mindset was not ready to accept the help that was being offered. And that's why it's so important that you mentioned this, and that we do have that talk about it, about really realizing, where are you at? I know we know you're hurting. We know you're struggling. We know you. So we're there. And now what you said before, we got all of these organizations that can help you. Exactly. Maybe this one is not the first one you go on, maybe something else.
Well, and that's just us being honest and doing it the right way. I mean, for us, it's all about clinically facilitated, evidence-based or evidence-informed group therapy for trauma. That is Wounded Warriors Canada. And we're not trying to be all things to all people. We're deliberate and honest with our participants or our applicants that, this is really tough slog and work, tough trauma work. But when you're ready, this will transform your ability to process and regulate triggers, symptoms, or a specific trauma or traumas in your life. That's what we're here to do, to provide this population with long-term skill development to manage what we know is, in some way, shape, or form, a lifelong impact of OSI.
Yeah, it's not just a good go. It's the thing that we're going to do the work in.
It doesn't go away after your workout. It doesn't go away after a swim. It doesn't go after a massage. It doesn't go away after cope. But one of the things we realized is gaps in the system when we were funding things was lots of programming out there in the space that provides that reprieve, that support. I would just say sometimes it was a bit temporary in nature in terms of what we know about OSI, what we know about the effects of PTSD, and the long-term effects of these injuries. So we're a bit of a gap we identified was, let's provide some high-end clinical work here that can really get at regulation, processing, and skill development. So if they because if we can work with them through one trauma on a group program and they can really learn how to process, our attempt is to say, well, if something comes up or there's another scenario, incident, or trigger, use those same skills. Yeah. Use what you've been taught and learned to manage that as well.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? I haven't heard one person yet saying that they went on one of your programs that it wasn't beneficial.
Well,
I haven't heard any bad press or anything like that. Even some people that didn't have success, because you've had some of them that says, this is not for me or whatever that is, said, you know what, it was nothing but awesome, and I'll just do it later. When somebody says that, I'll go do it later. It's not right now. You know that they've understood your message.
And we see it all the time. We've had people apply year 1 of release and come back in year 3 and they're ready to go. And because they hadn't been set up yet with a psychologist that truly understand them and was a good fit, they hadn't started on their path of eating and sleeping and actually like all these critical elements of a wellness plan and wellness strategy, which you could talk forever on because you've really made that part of your life, is so critical to an overall package for life with an OSI.
Yeah, a week with an organization is not going to fix your problems.
No.
It's the foundation that you set, and the blocks that you put in your programs that you're offering are some of these blocks to build.
And we kind of see ourselves like right in that critical middle stage. So if you're hopefully you are seeing a psychologist that's working with you. Hopefully, you're starting to you may not drink at all anymore. I mean, the substance abuse side is not part of where you're at in your life anymore, or maybe it never has been.
Mm-hmm.
You're exercising more. You're coming to us having put in some work, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And it's not like a last ditch effort. Like when we started doing this work in 2013, we were very much, because there was not a lot of out there in the external NGO space. The average vet I would talk to in group program we were funding would be like, this is the first service program I've taken, and I've been living with this for 8-10 years.
Right.
I'm going, holy, you could just see, Bruno, the effect in their face. Like they have been living with this untreated, unsupported for almost a decade. That was like the average. Now we're pushing this up. Early intervention is key. Do these things, and then you're ready to come here relatively quickly and begin that skill development as fast as we possibly can. That's really what is working for the first responders is, we're getting the vast majority of first responders that are taking our services now are still actively employed.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. I love it. I absolutely love it.
We're pushing this and pushing this and pushing this. Just like any physical health injury, early intervention is key.
It is. So you said that, you're mid-tier, but anybody that is struggling with you right now, don't know where to go, can reach out to Wounded Warrior.
Absolutely.
And you guys will direct them because they've heard all of this. So, now we're getting into the part where we're coming back up. We're talking about all the stuff that we do. Yeah. And for you, Scott, personally, and also for Wounded Warrior, if you want to say, what are you excited about? What's coming up?
Well, I'm excited. Well, first, number one, I'm excited to get the groups back together again. I mean, COVID scared me for a whole bunch of reasons because, we hit a hard stop. There were people lined up who have taken that knee, have put their hand up. They have come out of that difficult shell to say, I'm ready for a group trauma program. And I can only imagine how difficult that is. I don't speak for those people like yourself ever, but I can only imagine how difficult that is to do. So when we get all this lined up and we're get all these deliveries lined up from March and through the summer, and then wham, COVID cliff, and sorry, there's none. You're going to have to wait. And wow, I was really nervous about those setbacks. We stayed in touch with those people on our waiting list. We constantly were in communication with them to keep them hyped in the fact that this is going to come. And so I'm beyond excited that we are back at it here. We ran our first couples-based equine program last week, and our full cycle of deliveries are back at it through the fall into 2021. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to add some virtual capability to how we do some service provisions.
Everybody's moving in that branch, right? If you're not moving into virtual possibilities, you're missing out. You're going to be left behind.
It saved our ability to run our kids program through the summer, and we had a lot of families that would have also been devastated having injuries in the home, and now kids in the home full time with really no place to send them, or like they have no support. They're trying to help their kids by putting them in camp and engaging them with their peers, and that became not an option.
Yeah.
So to get 75 to 100 kids in a virtual program for us for the summer was the feedback, the testimonial, some of the evidence that we're already tracking was simply amazing. Okay. So I'm excited for that, and I'm just excited for hopefully the world to get itself a little back together here and let the key things that help people stay well and active and healthy can resume again, whether that's gyms, pools, fitness facility, like these things that there's so many elements that go into taking care of yourself. And so many of them have been lost and negatively affected because of COVID-19. I'm just really excited about what's going to come in 2021.
Yeah, I am too. I think that this will settle down and, we'll get back on track. But the world is forever changed once again, right? It was 9/11. Now it's this. And I think that this has changed, has made realize that a lot of us weren't ready right? A lot of people weren't ready, right? That you saw that with the toilet paper and the hand sanitizer and all this stuff. People weren't ready. And then also how to quickly pivot in your business to go and say, okay, now the funds aren't coming in. It's the same thing for me, right? My business, like you were saying, dead stop.
Dead
Right?
stop.
Dead stop. And for 2
Okay.
months, there was nothing. In one overnight, I had 7 projects going on with, with police departments, with all these things, project going on. On the 14th of March, nothing. No more emails, no more phones for 2 months.
Like,
right?
It was a hard time, and I'm not used to being not productive, and I just love being, just love doing helping and doing transformational work, and then with there's no end to it or end in sight to it. I mean, we're all trained as humans that, okay, if this is going to be hard, we'll get through it. I know what the end is. It's like, I don't care how long or hard this is. I know what's going to come to an end. This has been so uniquely different in that, like, no one knows what that is. No one knows what it looks like. So I'm just really excited for 2021.
It is. And just so you know, in May, and I think that's what it is for you as well, you said, is that when you did that pivot, then business picked back up, and it's like even more than before now, because people are seeing, hey, wait a minute. A lot of companies realized that being virtual, remember all these old CEOs that were saying, what are these kids? They want to work from home all the time. They want to be traveling. Now they're like,
in your office. I want to be able to walk in your office and see you looking at your keyboard or something like that.
Exactly. Now they're saying, wait a minute, we saved all of that money. Oh, these kids were onto something.
All I had to do was give them a laptop. Like, come on.
Yeah, so I don't have to pay for this real estate and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly what it is. So there was a lot of learning, that was done through the COVID. And once again, to close this up, what I like to do, Scott, is I like to show people that everybody that's on the show is exactly like they are. They're human. So I ask questions that might, put you on the spot a little bit here. And then after that, I'll give you a piece, a little amount of time for you to give a piece of guidance for our audience. And then we'll give them all the information they need to reach you.
Good.
So the first one I got for you is, what's the best advice you ever received?
I was always, my parents always instilled in me, like, that nothing comes free or easy. And you're Scott, no silver spoon in this mouth. You're going to have to earn everything that you want in life. And you're going to have to work hard for everything that you'll ever have in life. And I think that is truly been embodied through my experience here with Wounded Warriors. Coming to an organization with a couple $100,000 in the bank, a laptop, a cell phone in the back from orthodontist office with no if there was never ever a truism to my parents' statement about, no silver spoon, work hard for everything that you're going to have in life, and put your head down and just do good things, and good things happen. My sister and I were raised that way from childhood. As a simple middle-class family, parent, General Motors employee, Bowmanville, Ontario kind of kids, that just, it's never going to change for you in your life. And I remember thinking and talking to my parents a lot about that when I first ended up here, going, like, boy, are you two ever right? Because look at my life now. So I think hard work, just do good things happen, stick to your mission, stick to a vision. Try not to overcomplicate things. I think that's the one thing, is that life isn't as complicated as sometimes we try to make it, or it's made up to be. Keep it simple. A lot of the world still lives that way, and I think that a lot of people still appreciate that. So
right, live simple, right? Because complexity is the enemy of progress.
You can build a great product. You can do great things. It doesn't always have to be complex or avant-garde or these kinds of things. It's just do really good work and people will be attracted to it.
Absolutely. I agree with you. So share one of your Scott's personal habits that contributes to your success.
My personal habit is I like to see impact and outcomes in anything I do in my life. So if I cut the grass, I love it better look good. Like, I like to see the.
You cut it diagonally and everything. Is that what you do?
Like anything I do, I'm an output, like impact. What's the so what? And that's why I've learned a lot from working with veterans. Like, hey, Scott, like, shut up. What's the so what? Just tell me directly. I don't care about it. Don't talk. Maybe make it 2 seconds. So what? And to me, that's really kind of the way I fit in a bit with, so quickly in some regards, with veterans and first responders, is because I've been that way through my father my whole life. Is Like, just, I don't really care about the fluff and stuff. So what? What's the output going to be? What's the impact going to be? What's this going to look like when you're done?
Right.
And so that's something I kind of live by every day in everything I do. And it's translated well here too, because we ended up wanting to make an organization that was all about the impact. Let the programs speak for themselves. Mm-hmm. Let the clinicians and the clinical work speak for itself. We shouldn't have to sell anything for doing, trauma work for ill and injured uniformed service members. There shouldn't be any selling to that.
No.
So to me, that's what I do every day, that to be true to myself, and it translates well into.
So focus on the outcome.
Focus on the outcome of everything.
Okay, right on. Awesome. What is one, because like you said, what your journey was to get before you became the CEO of Wounded Warrior, what is one resource, either a book, a course, a seminar, or something that you could say that our listeners should kind of pay attention to?
There is a book by Jim Collins, and it's called Good to Great. Mm-hmm. And it's a book that I would recommend everybody read. It's a book that basically took the top 10 Fortune 500 companies, and this goes back up to the early 2000s. But mm-hmm. It really addressed leadership, what made businesses take the good to great leap, and what made a lot of businesses just stuck in good. And I'm fascinated by that kind of thing, about especially in this day and age where how big your profile needs to be as someone in my position, and I'm not that kind of guy. I want the profile to be big from Wounded Warriors Canada as the profile, not Scott Maxwell or anybody else that works for our team. It's not about us. It's about the organization and the work that it does. And I've learned a lot by reading Good to Great. So I would hope everybody that's listening would have a chance to read that. It's Jim Collins is the author. Book's titled Good to Great. I think no matter what you do in your life, you will learn some really key and fascinating concepts about what you might think would need to be in place for a business or something to go from good to great, and not.
Right. And you know what? The thing is that I love to drop that stats when people talk about books, how important they are. And we've walked away from that. Oh. The most successful people in the world, the CEOs of Fortune 500s and all these things, read up to 65 books a year.
Yep.
Right. And the average bear is 1.3. So do you think there's a correlation there? The CEOs make 375% more money, or are successful more because of that. So I think that's the key there. And for the veterans and the first responders and our listeners that are out there, if you're like myself, who's dyslexic and have sometimes a really hard time, now tinnitus and everything that we're broken of, that you have a hard time reading a book that it puts you to sleep and everything, I highly recommend audiobooks.
Like, I was going to say.
It's a lifesaver for me. It's a thing that you can do at any time while you're on your run, your walk, whatever. And it's absolutely changed my life.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't have a lot of time because I stare. I'm looking at my screen and reading so much during my day that I want to read more than I can actually process. So I've went to audiobooks a couple of years ago, and it's a game changer for me in terms of like learning new content and new themes and new things and so on. But I think I would prefer that anyway over sitting down and having to go get this big book and where do they put them in the whole thing. It's just kind of, audio is easy.
That's what it is. And the brain is designed to just go for the path of least resistance.
Yeah, if you're in your car or you get it put in your ears, you're out for a walk, like whatever. It's just great.
I love it. The last one to show that you're actually human. What's your favorite movie and why?
So I have a favorite series of movies, and that is the Rocky series. I don't know why, the inspirational elements of that, like the underdog, how they kept almost everybody together for 5 films. I just, you'll never see that again in life. And I don't know, I just felt a lot of truisms through the development of those films and the low budget, $1 million to go into Rocky 1. And just, to me, I could watch it 400 times and never tire with it. And some of the concepts it instills, like hard work and believing in yourself, even through like so much self-doubt, and
just a story of how Sylvester Stallone came to Rocky.
Underdog story in life, and the Philadelphia example. And I mean, for me and my life and my friends and our life and how we grew up, and Darryl Caswell and that, like, to me, it was just, we were just all kind of just going to have to work hard for everything that we had in our life, as I mentioned earlier, no matter what. I've never won anything. I'm never going to win anything. I don't even play because I know I can't win.
Yeah.
So I've never won a silent nothing. I'll never win nothing. So I've decided that how could Rocky and the Rockies not be my favorite set of films?
And of those, because if you're a listener out there and you haven't heard the story told about how Sylvester Stallone got to make Rocky, go listen to that right now. There's tons of like on YouTube and all these things because it is life changing. But my question to you is that because you've explained why, it's because of the hard work of the Rockies. What is it?
Yeah.
5 now? 5, 6?
There's 5. Yeah.
There's 5. Which one's your favorite?
I would say, oh geez, I love the family-based aspect of 2. When Adrian says "win" in the hospital after the baby's born, I cry like a little school. I mean, my wife says I don't cry for any film in my life, but I bawl my eyes out when she says "win" and he goes and trains and beats. I mean, that is epic. So that's probably my favorite. But I'll say the other part about it is complacency is a terrible thing in life for people that are trying to do good work and do things. And I think they did a hell of a job of showing how profoundly powerful and devastating complacency will be in Rocky 3 with Mr. T.
Mm-hmm.
When he's training, he's a millionaire. You know, he's at the live TV gym and so
Such
on.
a good movie.
And Mr. T is just beating up the walls in a basement on a brick wall and punching.
Clubber Lang.
Clubber Lang, like to me. So I like the family-based aspect of 2 and showing like how important and vital family is to everything that we have in life, and don't ever lose sight of track of that in everything you do professionally. And I think complacency is the enemy of great in the good to great. One of the biggest elements they talk about is the complacency. You get lazy, you get tired, you're stuck being good, and good is getting in the way of you being great.
Good's the enemy of great. I've always been told that. I've been told that by my jump sergeant when I was a jumper. He told me, he says, never adopt the attitude of good enough.
100%. And that's what he did in Rocky 3. And it killed his trainer because the stress of his complacency killed his trainer, Mickey. And he got the crap beat out of him by Clubber Lang. And then he figured out how to go back to his roots in the gym with Apollo. And anyway, there's just so many. Like
it's so, and some of the nicest, biggest speeches and everything are from the Rockies. They're still talked about this. And we'll put Rocky aside here and close this up. What's one piece of guidance or the advice you would like to give to the first responders and veterans out there?
I would say that no matter what, their help, you will. I know right now it might be a lot harder to find help than it should be, to find support than it should be, but it does exist. Like there's services out there. There's great people. There's great advocates. There's great programs like this that bring awareness and attention to it. There's people out there really trying hard for you and want to help you for all that you've done. So I just hope that in learning and knowing what we know about the helplessness and the hopelessness of these injuries, that that they will somehow believe that despite how bad they're feeling today, or tomorrow, or they did last week, that the days will get better, the sun will shine tomorrow, and help is available, and avail yourself of it because it's here for you. The country's here for you. The country cares profoundly about you, and always will, and is really in your corner, and we just got to find ways to make those corners a bit more accessible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I like to always tell them, I said, you know what, like you just said, there's so many organizations, so many people that want to help and everything. The only thing you need to do is actually get up and reach out, because if you don't, you're making a choice.
That's right. And it's not easy, and it should be a lot easier in this country. There's no question. But, when it comes to life, death, active, non-active, healthy, unhealthy, it's not worth it. There is enough out there that you will find it. One piece of the puzzle will continue to turn that crank in forward for you to feel better and to live better and to be better.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. Where can people reach out to you? Because we're going to put all your social media.
My email is just scott@woundedwarriors.ca. You can reach me there anytime. Woundedwarriors.ca is the URL to the site with all the programs. All the handles are going to be posted on the thing for our social media accounts, which is less so if you're looking for program support, etc. That I wouldn't worry about that so much. I would go to our website specifically, look up the programs, apply, reach out to me if you have first off, if you have any questions about anything, what you might be a good fit for, how you're doing, just email me, scott@woundedwarriors.ca.
Amazing, Scott. Thank you so much for answering the call and being on the battle plan today. Thanks, buddy.
Anytime. Thanks.